Okay, let's start talking about rear end suspension or rear suspension. I am pretty sure, I'm just going to use a regular, either a Ford 9 inch or a Chevy 12 bolt or, one of the heavier truck rear ends or something like that. Yeah, I don't really mind. It could be anything as long as it has the right gear ratio. I might pull the rear end out of the Avalanche and use that. I've got to figure out what the ratio is and all of that, but that rear end is at least tied to the motor, the computer, the transmission that I'm going to use out of that truck. So, maybe that's the way to go. Maybe just pick up another Ford 9 inch. Trying to keep this on a budget. So, the Avalanche is a good possibility. So let's talk about, other than the rear end itself, obviously we want disc brakes in the rear. But, how are we going to mount this thing? How are we going to suspend this chassis? Four link is a very common one. Four link with a panhard bar. Um, we could do a three link with a panhard bar, similar like what we used to do in the circle track stock cars, the late models. That's a good way to do it too. You've got some height constraints in here, however. You don't really want your you don't really want your rear end to violate this height. Because your truck floor is going to be down around here somewhere. So whatever you do, you don't want it to go higher than that, and that's pretty important. So what I'm going to do is let's start with a four link. I'm gonna First thing I'm going to do is I went out and found a rear end housing model. This was available on GrabCAD. GrabCAD is a nice resource for this sort of thing. You can get like QA1 shocks. You can get, people model this stuff up and throw it out there for other enthusiasts to use. So why not? You can get step files, you can get SolidWorks, but this is a pretty generic Ford 9 inch. 3 inch tube is all I really cared about with disc brakes. The hub width on this particular one is 58 and 5/8. And that's fine. I have no idea if that's the hub width I'm going to want, but this will at least get me started. So for four link, I threw some brackets on it, and I'm going to do a four link a little different than what you would traditionally do. Like the bottom links are going to be outside the frame. The top links will be inside the frame. And there's a reason for this. I'm not crazy. I'll show you why. So this is again just the first idea. I could do a torque arm suspension with two drag links. I could do a truck arm suspension. We had a Bush North car, NASCAR Bush North. We had a truck arm suspension with that. That would be another cool way to do it. Pretty simple. But to start out with, I'm going to look at a four bar suspension, triangulated, and I'll show you what I mean. So this is kind of what I came up with. This is a 4 bar. So here, let me just make this guy transparent so we can see what's going on. Okay, so the trick to a 4 bar link is you want these bars parallel at all times. That keeps your pinion angle consistent. Okay, until you get stupid high, which you wouldn't do, or stupid low, which you wouldn't do. But in the 4 or 5 inches of travel, your pinion angle change is minuscule. Especially the longer the bars, the better. These are a little long. I don't know if that's where I'm going to keep them or not. But again, this is a starting point, and it's open for discussion, for guys. So let's chat it up. Let's talk about different ways to do this. So I did a 4 bar link here, but I did the top bars triangulated. and I'm not sure this is the way I'm going to do the triangulation bars, but in theory, with triangulated top bars, similar to what GM had in the F bodies and the A bodies, B bodies, except for their triangulation was coming this way off the frame rail to the top of the housing. I don't really want to get off the top of the housing just simply because of my clearance issues. So this is about as high as you can get without trying to drive this thing up through the bottom of the truck bed. But the idea behind a triangulated system is, in theory, you don't need a pattern bar because this angle and this angle will maintain the width of the rear end, so it won't float around left and right. Now, if that doesn't work, if there's a little too much play in these polyurethane bushings or Delrin or whatever I decide to use, I could always put a pattern bar in it. That's not going to be a problem. But the angular nature of these will keep this rear end from playing left and right significantly. But I still have parallel points. The other thing that you want to understand about 4-link bars, and it's not always easy to do, but the longer the distance between the pivot points, in this case I have about 9 inches, I believe, and it's consistent 9 inches in the rear end in this axis, you end up with, again, a better setup because the higher the spacing, the less pinion angle change you're going to get at extreme rotation. Now, that's kind of a given. Things to remember when you're doing a 4-link system. When you're doing a 4-link system, every bit of thrust, we'll call it, or forward energy that's driven into this rear end comes through this bar and pushes forward on that bracket. Okay, so in equal and opposite up here, it's pulling or trying to stretch these bars, but it's pushing all the thrust comes through this lower bracket. So this bracket, you want some beef there, fellas. You got to make that a little bit, on the hefty side. So and tie it into the frame well. Let me go back to not being transparent. So I also put in a fairly heavy cross member here, some 2x4 material to tie my center links to. And you can see the way I did this, I'm setting it up so I can use one long bolt here, nice grade 8 bolt to hold that all together. That gives me the best angle I can get at that spacing. Now, there is another possibility, the best angle for this is about 45 degrees. I'm at about 30 right now. I could shorten up, bring all this back, shorten up these links, and get this to 45-degree angle pretty easy. I still may do that. That's one of the things that I'm still kicking around. But the idea being, you want to get that as close as possible. Now, one thing I can see already is I don't have my tube right now is not right on the. This is the hole that I put in, the reference hole for the center of the rear wheelbase. So I just throw that hole in the model so that I can see where this is going to be, and I can right now see I have a problem. So that whole thing is going to come forward, maybe an inch or so. But again, this is one of the reasons why modeling it in CAD is pretty awesome, because you can, as you do that, you can get your distance right. The other possibility is I may have made this link longer than the bottom one, but I'll figure that out. I'll take a look at that. But this is kind of the way I'm leaning. I haven't tied the tuck shocks in, and I'm not really sure I'm going to use that type of shock mount. This is what we would typically have done on the stock cars, but again, I might do a 2-ear mount with this in the center. Different ways to do it. Again, this coilover shock just came from it's a QA1 14-inch coilover from GrabCAD. Don't sleep on that resource if you're going to do anything in 3D modeling. That makes it nice. So yeah, that's kind of the idea that I'm working on so far. I could change this, shorten these links, pull this cross member back and these mounting points, and get more of a 45 on this. I think that's safer, but I don't want to make it crazy short links either. These are on the long side. These are almost 30 inches. The bars are 30, so it's almost, maybe 33, 34 ish. Uh, I like to weld one end of my bars. This is going to be one of those things that's, once it's adjusted, it should be the same, and you're not constantly tweaking like we would on a stock car. So I'm going to weld the front heads of my bushings, and on the back rod ends, these will be threaded, so that I could, pull that bolt, adjust it as needed, put the bolt back in, measure it. That's fine. That's a good solid solution. So that's kind of where I'm headed with this. If anybody has any other ideas, again, still could put a pander bar in it. Isn't going to hurt anything. I do intend to put a sway bar back here somehow. Haven't worked that out yet either. Um, but the other thing that you concern yourself with a few things, right? I want to make sure I've got room for a battery back here somewhere. I think I do. I want to make sure I've got room to bring my exhaust back through here and come either, if I should choose to go up and over the rear end, I could just dump it on the ground right here in front of the rear end. Doesn't really matter. It's a pickup truck, so you can do that. There's going to be a gas tank back here that I need to consider. So all these things are kind of where I want them. I've got the spring and shock set up outboard, so I'm pretty happy with that. I've got it, reasonably close to the wheel. I may, it may make sense to kick this whole thing out another inch or so, which would give me more clearance down here. Could do that too. Could do that. I want to keep these bottom links straight, however. I do not want to put an angle in these because, again, all the thrust is running down through that bar onto that tab. If there's an angle in there, you could have issues. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm gonna throw it out there. If you like it, don't like it, you think this has got merit, doesn't have merit, you think I'm all wet on this, hey, throw it in the comments. Let's see what you think. But every GM that was ever built, in the 70s, 80s, it had this sort of diagonal four link, and they work. They help stabilize the rear end left to right. Now their four link is a lot shorter, and it's obviously stamped metal, but it works. So it's kind of a proven gig to me. But I would rather not run a pandered bar. I can. They're super easy to hook up and mount. That isn't going to be a problem. But in the stock cars, we had two styles of pandered bar. We had one that ran all the way over to the opposite side, frame rail to frame rail. Then we had the ones that we called the J bar that ran from the topper frame rail, hooked over the front of the pinion, and attached over here somewhere. Those I never really liked those. I always felt like it really did funny things to the roll center of my car. Where the standard pandered bar, I could keep the rear end fairly level and keep the rear frame fairly level and get better bite. There's many schools of thought on that, but that's a conversation for a different day. So the other thing we used to do is I used to put a rubber snubber right here in this trailing arm on the outside, so that when you were under full acceleration and really pushing on this bar, it was shoving that thing forward just a little bit, and when you let off, it pulled it back. That gets you a little bit of rear steer. I always liked that, but others did not. My friend Randy hated it. But I always I always felt like getting yourself a little bit more advantage before, in the entry turn was a good thing. So anyway, different story for a different day. This is kind of the approach I'm taking right now. If you got any comments or see something I'm missing, please chime in. Let's have a conversation. Again, this is not the final design. I'm not married to this, but I'm just curious what the world of YouTube would have to say about this. So it's all in the math, man. Just got to make the geometry work, and I think we can get there. So this will be a fun build. So before I posted this, I did a little bit more work back here. I added some support to the side lateral support to the frame rails. This just seems like a good idea. And I also put in since it's very convenient, I've already kind of contaminated this space with my rails. So I put in a 45-degree brace here. I did increase the angle on these two top links just a little bit more. It's not 45, this is 45, so this is more like 60. But it is better. I think that is a better angle for that. The other thing I did was I made these a little wider and spaced my my lower mounts out about an inch. I'm going to just put in a piece of probably just a filler bushing in here, just so that this plate remains contiguous up the side, keep it good and strong. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I changed the shock mount on the top, although you can't really hook it up because it will collide as soon as you do. But this kind of gives you an idea what the travel's like. And this is close to ride height, I think. Might need a little adjustment. I still may have to play with this bottom mount a little bit, but that's kind of where I'm at. So, let's have the conversation. What do you guys think? I think I still need to work in, or I want to work in a sway bar mount into this scenario. I think that will be beneficial. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it, but I can see some possibilities. I could use this bracket, come right across the back with my sway bar mount, my sway bar, and come up and pick up the side of the frame rail. Although with this triangular top piece, that's going to kind of act as a sway bar a little bit too, but not a lot. There's still rubber bushings that'll really catch hell. So seems like a good idea, and I'll probably start poking around at that next if I can find a good drawing of a sway bar for appropriate use. Anyway, this is kind of where I'm at. This is the rear suspension. Front suspension, we got some options there. Tell me what you think. There are a lot of Mustang 2 front ends kits that you can buy. You can buy independent front suspension kits from the Rodster shop, from Scott's Hot Rods. You can buy them, and those aren't necessarily Mustang 2 setups, but I don't know. I've also got, where is it? I've got a model of I've got a model of a Corvette C5 front suspension, and it is possible that I could model something after that, make my own A-frames, use all the same mounting points. Something's not happening. So, that's one possibility. Yeah, there you go. This is just kind of thrown in there to give you an idea, but it's not straight. It's not right. But that's like a C5 Corvette front suspension. But the important part is the pivot point locations, the caster camber, bump steer, camber gain, that sort of things would all be answered by this model. So that's one possibility. It even has a racket pinion in it. So that's a Corvette C5 model that, maybe that's something to model up and build my own A-frames. I don't know, but it's not. I got to imagine buying a whole front suspension from a C5 Corvette would be rather expensive, but you never know. So anyway, this is kind of where I'm at. I've got different options for the front end, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Lay it on me. So again, back is kind of a first pass at this. Interested to hear everybody's input.